The grand halls of the Thalorian palace echoed with a silence heavier than any storm. Queen Seraphine, the radiant sovereign of a civilization that spanned 3 star systems, lay in her opulent chamber, pale and fragile, a shadow of her usual commanding self. The palace chefs, masters of interstellar cuisine, had prepared delicacies infused with rare spices from distant nebulae, ingredients cultivated in zero-gravity gardens and harvested by drones programmed for perfection. Yet, one by one, each dish was rejected. "Too rich," she murmured. "Too bland." Her hand pushed away the glimmering platters with the grace of a ruler, but the weakness of the sick. Advisors whispered behind gilded screens. Courtiers fretted over the political instability this illness could bring. Some saw opportunity in her frailty, calculating subtle moves that might place them closer to power. The queen's chambermaid, loyal for decades, hovered anxiously, her hands trembling as she tried to coax her monarch into eating. Nothing worked. Even the rarest delicacies, served on plates inlaid with crystalline veins from the Andromeda mines, failed to tempt her. And then the human arrived. Captain Elias, a diplomat from a distant, little-known planet, carried no golden trays or exotic aromas. He held in his hands a simple meal: roasted vegetables, a loaf of bread crusty on the outside, soft within, and a spiced protein shaped more like sustenance than artistry. The scent was earthy, familiar in a way no Thalorian spice could ever be. The courtiers scoffed, masking the disdain with polite smiles. "Is this a joke?" one muttered, barely concealing his disbelief. But Queen Seraphine, even in her frailty, noticed. She leaned on her silk-covered divan, eyes sharp despite her waning strength. There was a calmness to the human as he ate, a quiet reverence, a dignity not born from wealth or power, but from something deeper, something she had long forgotten existed in her meticulously ordered world. The warmth of the aromas wafted into her chamber, teasing senses numbed by years of perfection and protocol. For a moment, she simply watched. The courtiers stiffened, unsure if they should interrupt. The palace chefs clenched their fists in silent indignation, their creations, perfected over years, dismissed by a being who wielded no science, no artistry, no royal permission. Yet, something in the way Elias held the food, unhurried, almost meditative, sparked a flicker within her. Curiosity, sharp and insistent, stirred in the queen's chest. Against her chambermaid's protestations, she called for the human's lunch to be brought to her. The room filled with the quiet tension of disbelief and anticipation. Courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. A human, an outsider, now stepping into the queen's personal realm. It was unprecedented, audacious, and scandalous. Seraphine lifted the first bite to her lips with trembling fingers. The flavors were strange, yet comforting, alive in a way the rarest palace delicacies had never been. A warmth spread through her body, subtle at first, then insistent, as if the very essence of the human's presence had injected life into her weary body. She paused, savoring the sensation, eyes narrowing slightly with the first spark of intrigue she had felt in months. The queen's hand trembled, but not from weakness. This was curiosity, wonder, and the faintest stirrings of hope. And in that quiet moment, the rigid walls of Thaloria's palace began to feel alive again. Queen Seraphine sat propped against the velvet cushions of her divan, the simple human meal before her. Courtiers held their breath, unsure whether to step forward or flee. Never had they witnessed the queen breaking protocol so boldly. She studied the food, roasted vegetables glistening with oil, bread warm and fragrant, and a protein shaped more like sustenance than artistry. Yet there were no exotic garnishes, no alien embellishments, just honesty on a plate. The human, Captain Elias, ate calmly, his movements deliberate and unpretentious. He did not seek attention, he did not bow or perform for the palace, he simply ate. But there was a rhythm to it, a quiet dignity that drew the queen's attention more than the rarest Thalorian delicacies ever had. She watched him chew slowly, savoring each bite, and felt something stirred deep within her chest, something unfamiliar, something alive. For the first time in weeks, Seraphine felt the sharp pang of hunger, not the physical ache, but the yearning for life itself. Her lips trembled as she took a small piece of bread, biting into it cautiously. The taste was simple, earthy, yet vibrant, awakening senses dulled by months of illness. She closed her eyes, allowing the warmth to spread through her body, and the room seemed to grow brighter, less oppressive. "Your Majesty," whispered her chambermaid, worry etched on her face. "Are you certain?" "Silence," Seraphine interrupted softly, but firmly, surprising even herself. Her voice, though weak, carried an unmistakable authority. She could feel the stirrings of energy returning to her veins, the heavy fog of sickness beginning to lift. She took another bite, this time more confidently, and allowed a small smile to tug at her lips. The courtiers murmured among themselves, incredulous. "She's eating, by the stars! She's actually enjoying it!" Some whispered fearfully, others with envy, but all felt the seismic shift in the palace air. The queen, once fragile and unyielding, was responding to something they could not create or control, a human's presence, and his simple, unadorned meal. Elias looked up and caught her gaze. He offered no explanation, no words of encouragement, only a gentle nod, as if to say, "Take what you need." And Seraphine did. Bite by bite, the queen's strength returned, subtle at first, then undeniable. Her eyes regained their sharp, commanding glint. Her posture straightened, the color returning to her cheeks like the first flush of dawn over Thaloria's capital. For the first time, she realized that this human was unlike any creature she had encountered, not in size or in strength or even in intellect, but in resilience, in presence, in the quiet ability to awaken life in others simply by being himself. Her mind, long clouded by illness, began to clear. She understood that this moment was larger than herself. It was a glimpse of what humanity could offer, even to a civilization that had mastered the stars. And so, as the final crumbs of bread vanished from her plate, Seraphine leaned back, fully aware that the palace, and perhaps even her empire, would never be the same. The human had not just fed her body, he had rekindled her spirit. And that spark, she knew, could ignite a revolution. By the next morning, Queen Seraphine's chamber was alive with a quiet electricity that the palace had not known in months. The lingering pallor of illness had vanished from her face, replaced by a flush of vitality and the sharp, commanding presence that had once inspired loyalty and fear throughout Thaloria. Courtiers whispered in hushed tones, unable to believe the change. Some called it a miracle, others a human trick beyond comprehension. Yet no one could deny the truth. The queen had been restored, and the source was him. Captain Elias, quiet and unassuming, continued his simple daily rituals. He did not flaunt his role or claim glory for the queen's recovery. Yet everywhere he went, a ripple of change followed. Palace staff began to rethink the rigid rules that had constrained them for generations. Diplomats, observing his unpretentious demeanor, realized that power did not always need to be wielded through wealth, technology or force. It could exist quietly, in presence, in integrity, and in the simple act of living well. Seraphine embraced the human's influence with a wisdom born of both experience and rebirth. She called her council together, not to decree new policies or demand blind obedience, but to share what she had learned. For centuries, we have measured strength by our treasures, our trees, our exotic delicacies. We have forgotten what it means to nourish the soul, to inspire one another with simplicity and sincerity. Elias has reminded me that true strength does not require spectacle, it requires heart. The advisors listened, some with skepticism, others with grudging respect, but all felt the undeniable shift in the Queen's